The comments, views, and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of Point72 Academy. All information provided herein is for informational purposes only, is not investment advice, and should not be deemed as a recommendation to buy or sell securities. All investments involve risk, including the loss of principal. This podcast does not constitute an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to purchase any security or investment product. Any such offer or solicitation may only be made by means of delivery of an approved confidential offering memorandum. This podcast may not be copied, and it may not be distributed or furnished to or used by anyone other than the intended recipient without the express written consent of Point72.
What I found is that Point72 is focused on developing talent. Business development in the academy is here to find smart people that are passionate about investing and really turn them into investment professionals. And I would not be in my seat today if it wasn't for the academy, if it wasn't for the mentorship I had as an analyst.
That's Mike. He's a portfolio manager and was part of our very first Point72 Academy class. For many investment professionals, becoming a portfolio manager at a firm like ours is their ultimate career goal. It's a coveted seat. But this episode will help you understand how to get there. I'm Jaimi Goodfriend, director of the Point72 Academy. When we launched the Academy in 2015, we did it with the goal of bringing new perspectives to our firm and growing a diverse set of talent into the great investment analysts of tomorrow. But we don't want the growth to stop there. Analysts at our firm have the opportunity to own their development, and we expect them to lean into the difficult work of building expertise in their coverage and rigor in their investment processes. In this episode, you'll hear from Mike Mongiardini, one of the original Point72 Academy grads, who's now a portfolio manager at our firm. He'll talk about his path from Academy Associate to long-short analyst to portfolio manager. Then you'll hear from one of our PMs, Gabe Rincon, and head of Point72 LaunchPoint, John Weiner, who runs the same program that helped prepare Gabe for a PM seat. I invited Mike to talk about his experience in the Point72 Academy, how he knew he was ready to become a PM, and what he's learned along the way. Enjoy. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jaimi.
You and we kind of sort of started the Academy together. You were part of the first class ever, and today you're a portfolio manager building your business through the Point72 LaunchPoint program.
I know, time flies. Huh?
I guess my first question is, how did we get here? How did you first hear about the Academy, and what has your career been like since joining?
So, in terms of the academy, I had heard about it when I was in business school. I was studying, going for my MBA at Columbia, and I was learning a little bit more about finance and learning what it's like to invest. And I was really intrigued about opportunities on the buy side. And so I had known someone at business development here at Point 72. And I thought, this would be maybe a 3, 4, maybe 5 year period before I could actually make that transition. And she told me at the time, she's like, look, like you're in luck, like you seem, given your background, it's unconventional. And right now what we're doing at Point 72, we're starting this academy program, basically. And she told me a little bit about it, just how, the academy was looking for people with high ceilings, very smart, passionate about investing, and they wanted to take them early on and kind of mold them and teach them how to be an investor. And so she put me in contact with the academy recruiting. Thankfully, I was able to get through all the rounds and made it into the academy. It was a great class, and spent the last 7 years here.
Well, let's talk about that. So you mentioned, in your conversations with the recruiting team that you have this non-traditional path to finance. Maybe you could unpack that a little bit for our audience.
I studied history during my undergrad, but I really wanted to serve my country. And I thought, if there was ever a time to really serve, that was the time to do it. So I went into the recruiting office, and I went in and really just asked them, like, look, I'm looking to serve. Here's my college degree. I'd like to join it. And at the time, they had told me about this new opportunity. It was called the 18 X-ray pipeline. It was taking people that scored high enough on their aptitude and physical tests, and giving them an opportunity to try out for their special forces selection process. And I chose that route. And so I spent about a year and a half training to be a special forces soldier. And so that was a total of a 5 year commitment. The last 3.5 years I served on an ODA out of Tacoma, Washington. And it was at that 5 year mark that I had to make a decision, really, if I wanted to reenlist and continue my career. And that would have been at that point, I was getting ready to enter my early, I was getting ready to turn 30 at the time. And I thought, well, if I reenlist again, this is going to be my career full time for my professional life. And so I thought, you know, I really want something different. I want to be challenged in new ways, and that's when business school was the opportunity I chose. And I spent 2 years there, and then came over to Point72 through the academy.
So, what do you think as you think about your career in baseball and then, in the service? What skills or attributes or lessons would you say you brought here?
So I would say from my baseball experience, I think the importance of work ethic. You know, talent only takes you so far, and you really have to have a strong passion for what you're doing to succeed. And when I look back at my time playing baseball, I took it as far as I could take it, and so I had no regrets in my career and in my life playing baseball. But I knew that for me to reach my ceiling, work ethic would be a key component to that. And when I think about my time in the U.S. Army, I'd say the most important thing I learned there was like you are operating in an environment that is where you don't have complete information, and it's learning how to be comfortable in that environment and taking risk. That you kind of learn, and you learn, but you're forced to learn as a soldier. The other thing that struck me that I never realized that you learn in the army was just repeatable behavior and how important that is. And by doing that, you really become a subject matter expert. It's funny, before we go out on a mission, you're spending sometimes 12 to 24 hours really just running through the mechanics of what you're doing from the first step out of the vehicle to that last step back onto the vehicle. And so like that was really important for me, and it's really something I brought over to my investing career, was just the importance of process and the importance of finding a repeatable behavior that I can be a master of.
So it's been kind of a long time now, but if you can think back to the academy, what was the experience like there, and what similarities did you see then, and how would you sort of maybe just share with the audience a little bit more about what they can expect if they join?
I would say the first and foremost, the academy is there to teach you the hard skills required to be an investor, but it does it in a practical sense. And I really want to stress the word practical there. I had already had an MBA, so I had gone through kind of a business degree learning environment, but, like, in the academy, you're learning about accounting from the perspective of an investor. Statistics is another thing. When you're in, college and you're learning about correlations, you're really not learning how to apply that to the investing world. But in the academy, you're kinda given that crash course. The other thing that I wanna highlight with the academy that was super important, I thought, added a tremendous amount of value, was just the weekly lunches that we had. And I think this also speaks to just the culture of collaboration here at Point 72. Uh, but the academy, and Jamie, you did a great job pulling in PMs and senior analysts who really gave us, personal stories they had. And you were able to learn from their mistakes and some of their failures and some of their successes that they had, and it really sped up our learning. And so it was a great opportunity, and you really learn a lot just by sitting there having lunch with some of these portfolio managers.
Well, let's do a little bit of that here. So, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons you learned over your career to date?
I'd say the biggest one is that you are going to fail. You need to be comfortable with that, and it's kind of difficult for people that come into investing. Where for a lot of us, we've been successful in our lives, and so you come in and you realize that you're going to fail, and the most important thing is learning to be resilient. And it was very difficult for me early on to really think how to handle failure. But over time I realized like the way to approach it is like you really need to think about failure as opportunities to learn. Having that mindset that like you can improve, it really makes the difference.
So, when did you feel like you were ready for the PM role?
It's tough to pinpoint the exact time, when this light bulb, this switch went on, but it came down to I wanted to put my process into the market and make a bet on myself and say, like, see what this process could really do from a business standpoint. And so you have to be comfortable with, like, understanding that you're not gonna have all the information. The stocks aren't always gonna go the way you want them to go. Uh, but it really comes down to just being confident in what you're doing day in and day out, and staying true to yourself and being self-aware.
How did you seek mentorship and support of others sort of in the pursuit of wanting to make this transition?
So I reached out to several portfolio managers here, and learned from them. Nobody's going to tell you you're ready to make this transition, but it's really learning from them when they felt they were ready. And a lot of them actually helped me put together just the way to think about a business plan. Because as an analyst, you're not putting together a business plan, but as a portfolio manager, you really are developing a business here. And so reaching out to other portfolio managers was really key. Everybody always said, like, you're not gonna know for sure until, like, make that leap. What you're not gonna be able to solve for all the potential obstacles in front of you. But you have to make a determination if you want to put that bet on yourself, and really put yourself out there. And for me, that's really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to challenge myself and really, see what my process could do in the market.
So, what is the Point 72 LaunchPoint program?
So it's a training program for more emerging portfolio managers. It's led by John Weiner here. I think he was employee number 3 at Point 72. Really, we're meeting with him once a week, but we're also going through curriculum. And I'd say the two biggest goals, for me, were really, how do I grow my business, to be scalable? And so you're cutting things out, adding things in, and you're really just trying to be efficient with how you approach your day to day. And then the second thing is really finding blind spots and trying to fix those. And John's helped me out a lot with this. And just 2 weeks ago, he had put me in contact with another portfolio manager. We had been talking over the last couple of weeks. Me and John, we talked for maybe 2 hours, and he showed me some of the things that he did. To help him kind of improve. And it was really helpful to me to have that type of conversation. But it really points to what Point 72 is about and what this program is about. It's the curriculum is not one size fits all for everybody. It's about really thinking about what you need to do to build this business, and that's different for everybody.
So now being on the other side of this, you've hired analysts for your team. Maybe what are some points of advice you could give analysts and aspiring analysts who are listening to this podcast, now seeing the other side of it?
Yeah. So as an analyst, your job is pretty clear cut. You're following a process. As a PM, it's learning how to get comfortable taking risk on somebody else's work. As an analyst, you're doing the work yourself. You're closest to the name, and you're pitching it to your portfolio manager. And so it really comes down to, as a PM, you really have to trust your process and be clear with your process to your analyst. And so that's an important shift that you have to make as a PM.
Well, that's a really good point. How do you get comfortable with somebody else's work? How do you build that trust as an analyst? It's something that we talk about in the academy as the cornerstone of the beginning of their development once they graduate from us. So I think it'd be great to hear from you your perspective on how they can build that trust.
So I think, first and foremost, follow direction, right? Follow direction before you try to innovate. I always think, like, follow the directions. Your PM has done this before, and they have a task for you. Make sure you complete that task as best as you can. The other thing I would highlight is you really want to be intellectually honest. When you make a mistake, raise it to your portfolio manager. I know it stinks, right? When you're making a mistake, and you don't want the portfolio manager to think less of the quality of your work because you're raising mistakes. But we're all going to make mistakes, and really, your portfolio manager will trust you more if you are willing to raise the mistakes you've made and highlight them.
What about Point 72 makes it a great place to build a career as an investor?
I've spent my whole career here at Point 72, so I'm definitely going to be biased in this response. But what I found is that Point 72 is focused on developing talent. Business development in the academy is here to find smart people that are passionate about investing and really turn them into investment professionals. And my career speaks to it. I would not be in my seat today if it wasn't for the academy, if it wasn't for the mentorship I had from my portfolio managers, from the coaching, from Steve as an analyst. The other thing I think is important to highlight with Point 72 is that we've been doing it longer than other places. The academy has been around for now 8 years, excuse me, and it's important to realize that like we've worked out the kinks, we've learned from our mistakes, and we've developed a program that I think is part of the core of Point 72.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jaimi.
Before we let Mike go, we wanted to know more about his background and what drew him to an investing career.
When I was younger, I always wanted to be a professional baseball player. And so when I think about my time in grade school and high school, it was really, after school, I'd grab my mitt and go out and be playing baseball until the sun went down. And so I really tried to take my athletic career as far as I could. I was able to play in college and then a little bit more after college professionally. I'm very, very happy for it. I learned a lot from it. I learned the importance of work ethic and how you're really not going to reach your ceiling unless you apply yourself and be fully committed to what you're doing. It's funny, if you had told me when I was younger I'd be working for the New York Mets owner, I wouldn't think I'd be a portfolio manager at his fund, but it is what it is, and I'm happy to be in my seat. There are similarities and differences between being a pitcher on a baseball team and being a portfolio manager at a hedge fund. I'd say the closest similarity, I'd say, is you are really operating in an unknown environment and you're really just trying to put your best foot forward. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you're really trying to put your best pitch out there. And with investing, you're really trying to put your best stock pitch out there. One of the things that suits me for this job, I really like to be challenged. I like to wake up and be invigorated by my work. And that's really what the working at a hedge fund provides for you. There are no days off here. And I think once you start slacking, the market is going to tell you you're slacking. And so I think that, it's a motivating place to be, and working around people at Point 72 who really take pride in their work is inspiring. But I always make a point of trying to reach out to the academy and giving them kind of lessons learned in some of the ways I learned how to quicken my development as an analyst in terms of speed and efficiency and modeling. The thing that stands out the most is that these people are super smart and they're super passionate about investing. I always tell Jaimi, like, I'm very confident in the quality of the investment professional that comes out of the academy. Some of them have been they're the heads of their investment club at school, or they're all they have their own PAs. They're all very much in tune with the market, and really, they're all just trying to learn. And I think it's great. I always love talking to them. Mentorship's been a big important part of my career. It started with the academy. Um, learning from Jaimi, learning from some of the investment professionals that she brought in. It started there and it moved on to when I was on a team. My portfolio managers were great mentors, helping me find ways to improve my process. When I think about my daily goals, the most important one is try to improve something in your process.
That was Mike Mangiardini talking about his experience in the Point72 Academy, how he came to investing and making the transition to a PM seat. Next, I wanted you to hear from John Weiner and Gabe Rincon. John was a day one employee at our firm and spent the majority of his career as a healthcare PM here. Today, he runs Point72 LaunchPoint, where he provides mentorship and guidance to new PMs as they build their investing businesses at our firm. Gabe is a PM at our firm who spent more than 6 years as an analyst here before joining Point72 LaunchPoint and becoming a PM.
My name is John Weiner. I am the head of Point72 LaunchPoint.
My name is Gabe Rincon, and I'm a portfolio manager here at Point72.
I started at SAC Capital in 1992, fresh out of Indiana University. I was a finance major, but came into the firm with a limited skill set. But looking back now, I had some of those intangibles that were important to this job, which are things like passion, grit, self-awareness. I was focused on staying ahead as the firm was evolving. I'm a self-aware person. There's a lot I didn't know, so I was one of the first PMs to hire an analyst in the firm. I had a pretty good career as a PM, and in that time I had supported a bunch of my senior analysts as they transitioned to become PMs. I got to the point where it was time for me to do something else, and leading Point72 LaunchPoint was the natural next step for me.
I actually knew that I wanted to be an investor even from high school. So in college, I pursued opportunities doing internships at a hedge fund one year, doing investment banking another year, and realized I didn't want to be a banker, and I definitely wanted to go down the hedge fund route. Out of college, I worked at a firm called Cambridge Associates doing investment consulting. There, I met with a lot of hedge fund managers, and in that process, became even further convinced that I wanted to be doing what they were doing. And so I joined Merrill Lynch Equity Research in 2006, covering autos. And from there, I worked at various different hedge funds until I joined Point72 in January of 2016. And then I joined Point72 LaunchPoint in 2020.
So for an analyst to determine if they're ready to be a PM or us to determine if an analyst is ready to be a PM, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's a different combination of skill sets. But from the analyst standpoint, there should be very little doubt. They should be extremely confident that they're an expert in the sector that they cover. For a senior analyst, one of the career traps that they can fall into is deciding to become a PM too early. A PM's responsible for decisions that affect everyone on his team. There's a lot of stress in that responsibility, and it's not for everyone. And by the way, being a career analyst is a great job. We have senior analysts here doing what they enjoy, which is picking stocks. This is a difficult business, and markets are always changing. Team stability is something that could benefit everyone. If you're someone who thinks you're going to be a PM one day, that's great. Make a plan. Think big picture and do it the right way.
When I think about some of the main differences between being an analyst and a PM, I think ultimately both leverage a very similar skill set, but the job responsibilities are very different. When I was an analyst, I was very focused on being deep in my coverage universe. As a portfolio manager, you're responsible for the overall management and structure of a portfolio and responsible for the development of your team. I like to think of myself as an analyst still, but I just can't do that same level of modeling and fundamental analysis that I used to as an analyst whilst monitoring and managing the portfolio. So I really have to delegate a lot of those responsibilities to my team. In order to do that, I have to train them well in my processes. And so that's what I spent a lot of my time doing. And then really just trying to figure out where the strengths and the weaknesses are of the team and leveraging the strengths while trying to help them with their weaknesses so that ultimately we're just continually evolving and getting better.
Point72 LaunchPoint is the firm's emerging manager program. This is where we take experts in their space, whether senior analysts or sector heads, all from different models, and we provide them with time and space to build out a business. We like to do that up front without the pressures of managing money.
I definitely feel like there's a development culture here. You know, when I joined the firm back in 2016, I had already been on the buy side for 8 years, so I didn't really think there would be much necessary coaching for me as an analyst, but I was pretty wrong about that. I actually was given a lot of support to really learn how to get deeper into my coverage and was given a lot of tools that I had never had access to. And with these tools, I was able to, focus on my strengths and weaknesses and ultimately improve some of the weaknesses that I had developed over many years. And that goes down all the way to the junior analyst, entry-level analyst as well. That also continued when I became a portfolio manager. I had never been a PM, so obviously that was its own new learning curve. And for many people, they just kind of get thrown into it without a lot of help or support. But for me, I was very lucky to have the mentorship of Johnny, who guided me in thinking about, how do you ultimately build a portfolio that expresses the views that you're trying to take. And then, I'm lucky enough to actually sit very close to Steve. That's just been an amazing experience so far.
Everything starts with the academy. The academy kind of sets you up to build out that long-term career here. It gives you the fundamental skills that are needed that every analyst has to start contributing to their team and becoming part of that investment process. And we grow on that as your career grows.
So when I think about what advice I'd give to an analyst starting today, focus on being deep in what you do. Really dig in, get smart, and try to be differentiated. I have a team of 4 analysts, and one of them, the youngest one, is from the academy, has been on my team since July. She's dug into some of the new sectors that we've picked up coverage on. I've relied on her to really do that, and she's stepped up to the occasion. She is the one who's made me the smartest over the last 6 months, and that's what I need, and I think that's what a good analyst does.
That was John Weiner and Gabe Rincon talking about their career journeys, how analysts can progress, and making the transition to a PM seat. I'm Jaimi Goodfriend, and this is Becoming a Hedge Fund Analyst inside Point72 Academy. Listen to our entire series to hear from portfolio managers, analysts, and others on the ins and outs of this industry, and learn how you can become a part of it. Visit our website at point72.com/academy to learn more about how we are training the next generation of investors. We'll be back with one more very special episode in a few weeks. Thanks for listening.